Just want to bring some exceptionally talented attorneys in here for one moment. We have Bob Bianchi. He, of course, is a former prosecutor. He joins me in New York. We also have in Washington, Rene Sandler. Rene, too long no see. But from a prosecutor's perspective, Bob, let me just go to you. I know it's a case in development. They don't even have anyone yet. But what's your thinking as a prosecutor and how are you piecing this together to get justice for this beautiful girl that was killed and the mom who is, you've heard the interview, she's just shattered.
Right, so as a former homicide prosecutor, the first thing I want to do is not start jumping to conclusions on a case. This is the death knell for many investigations. We want to absorb a lot of data. Electronic data is going to be important. Developing and establishing motive is going to be important. Doing a victimology timeline, anybody who may have had a motive, like there was just mentioned by Mom, right. There may be, but we don't want to just go in that direction. I've seen that happen, Joey. Oh, it must be the husband that did it. It must be the... And so all the other evidence is disregarded. Right. They're going to be taking down cameras, and they're going to also be looking at, with all due respect, this is what you need to do as a prosecutor. Was she involved in anything that may have led to some sort of, we've seen gambling issues, drug-related issues. They're going to try to investigate every single thing, but the electronic data, Facebook and social media right now to me are key because it does sound like it could be even a hit for hire. You just don't know under these circumstances. Yeah,
so Rene, let me get to you. You know, we know you're a former prosecutor as well as a defense attorney. What is just your general thinking about the case? Obviously, the police believe there's some premeditation involved, someone wanted her dead. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think right now, as my colleague just said, it's time to scour the earth for any possible lead, social media, DNA, any type of forensics. It sounds like there's just nothing right now in terms of clues to point to a person or even a number of different potential individuals. But I agree with Bob, and I think right now the police have their hands full to try and identify any leads that are possible to try and solve this crime.
Rene Sandler, stand by. Bob Bianchi, stand by. Laney, we also have Darren Porcher. He's here in New York. He's a retired NYPD lieutenant and criminal justice expert. Darren, good to see you.
Thanks for having me, John.
Of course. Looking at this video and what we see, justification here, no justification. Under what circumstance could they apply a taser when someone's sitting in a chair, presumably posing no threat?
Well, I can understand using a taser against a non-compliant suspect. However, when we have an individual that has been restrained in that chair, then we have an issue. And when we take in consideration the abuse of force, he should have been isolated and contained, and a supervisor should have stepped forward and ensured that this individual was addressed properly. Another thing is you want to introduce a series of logistics, such as Velcro straps, for example. Time is on your side. There's no need.
Where, Darren? Where's the Velcro straps go?
This is a recommendation that I see. I was a lieutenant in the Internal Affairs Bureau, so on many instances I've investigated these types of prisoner abuse. When you have one aspect that's not working, such as the taser, then you resort to something else, such as Velcro straps. You strap his whole body up, and you put him in an isolation and containment cell. Then the supervisor should have stepped up. We have a group of people that are looking at this happening. However, no supervisor is stepping up and saying, hey, this is enough. That's enough.
So, Darren, on the face of it, and not asking you to jump to any conclusions, but on the face of it, as a supervisor as you are you troubled by the video? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
I'm troubled by it because it was apparent that the taser was not working. Therefore, it was necessary to employ other resources to contain this individual. There's no rush. He's already in lockup. We know where he is. Just give him some time, let him cool off, and then we'll revisit him. He's going to want to eat. He's going to want something to drink, etc. He will calm down on his own. But I just didn't see the dire need to taser this individual the way they did 40 to 50 times. And my mind was excessive.
And also, they were putting something over his face. What was that you see? Was that the spit mask that they were talking about?
Traditionally, in correctional facilities, they put a spit guard over someone's face, and that prevents an individual from spitting.
And we're going to see it right here. This is what it is, and that prevents spit. Obviously, with the pathogens and other things that would harm officers. Now, do you think this is based upon, and, you know, not to speculate, but we know that officers can't retaliate. You can protect yourself, right? But you can't retaliate against an inmate because of, you know, they may be acting in a way that you think is improper. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. The officer should be the avid professional. This is not a schoolyard game. You're paid to provide a service. therefore you need to be the avid professional. Here, in this particular instance, it was obvious that the officers didn't practice the procedural guidelines to maintain the safety of this inmate.
And that gets us to the lawsuit. And, Bob, that gets us to you. And I want to bring Rene Sandler into this also. But, Bob, I'll start with you. On the issue of the lawsuit, I mean, first things first, this is a liability matter, right? They're going after money because they're saying that the force was excessive. I guess the first issue I have in looking at the lawsuit is why only name the correction officers as opposed to the municipality, which is the deep pocket and is responsible, Darren, you correct me if I'm wrong, for the supervision and training of the correction officers at issue?
That's a great question, Joey. So I used to do a lot of civil rights work, and what you want to do is you want to be able to hook in the state agency, because under a code called 42 U.S.C. 1983, that's our civil rights statute.
Excessive force.
Excessive force fits within that category, and the individual police officers are actually entitled to a thing called qualified immunity. So even if their force was excessive, but somewhere down the line, all but the plainly incompetent officer is protected, but that's not true with the government agency. All you got to prove there is that there's a custom, practice, or policy of deliberate indifference. So if they either didn't have the right policies or they violated those policies, that's where the money in the case is.
I'm just not getting why not sue the municipality and everybody involved. Rene, let me go to you. With regard to the actual events here, do you think there'll be recovery? I know we're far along the line from having this resolved, but it appears, at least on the face of it, that something was amiss. Do you disagree with that, and do you think the officers may have been justified in doing what they did?
No, Joey, I don't see any justification for what they did. This is a mindset, and I'm sure there are other instances as well. This is a training issue, as you said, but the number of times this young man was tased within a 50-second period, it's amazing with the voltage going through him that he wasn't seriously harmed or killed and went into cardiac arrest. I mean, that's what you see in these kinds of cases. So in some regards, this young man was lucky. But I do agree that everyone needs to be sued, qualified immunity or not. Every pocket needs to be hit in a lawsuit like this. But this is a mindset that needs to be changed.
And so in getting to the issue of, and Rene, I'll stick with you momentarily, if everyone needs to be sued, and looking through this lawsuit, everyone's not sued. You have the 3 correction officers, the deep pocket, the people that train the officers, the people that are responsible for their supervision and oversight. Why not sue them?
I can't imagine that that wouldn't be subject to amendment down the road. It is not something that I would do. I don't know all the facts, obviously, and circumstances, but it's typically you sue every pocket that you possibly can, or amend in to bring others in and join parties.
Sure, go ahead, Bob.
There's one other practical matter here, too, Joey. The government agencies do not have qualified immunity. The individual officers do. And let's face it, in the end, where are the deep pockets? It is with the government agency, not with the individual officers.
Without question. Darren Porcher, last word. You're the expert here. What do you do to address issues like that? You were a professional dealing with law enforcement all the time. You want to make sure they're on the straight and narrow and that they do their job. What do you do? You're
going to have what we refer to as an after-action review, meaning you're going to make an assessment as to what happened, and you're going to look at what the procedural guidelines are in place. What was the precedence in connection with how officers traditionally dealt with these types of offenses? That way, then you're going to retrain your officers accordingly. These things happen quite frequently. However, it's necessary that the professional development stays abreast of the times that we're living in, because we can't use 1960s tactics in the year 2000.
Without question. And I know Rene Sandler was talking about a mindset, but the pushback to that was every case, I believe, needs to be judged individually, you know, on the merits of the case. It's unfortunate what we see. Long way to resolution, but I know that there's some very talented correction officers out there who do the right thing and certainly don't do any of this. But in any event, everyone stand by because there are a lot of reasons. Let me bring in Rene Sandler and Bob Bianchi. Bob, maybe I'm at a loss, and Rene, I'll start with you. I'm scratching my head. I don't know what law requires you to have a certain IQ. I think the issue turns on whether your children are safe, whether they're nourished, whether everyone's okay. Can you please explain to me what I'm missing?
You're not missing anything, Joey. I do CPS work regularly, and I will say that they have a big hammer, if you will. And they do take children right out of the hospital if there is an open case. It's the way it is in Maryland where I practice. The problem that I'm having from a due process standpoint for these parents is I have not heard one fact that puts these children at risk. None. Not a single fact. These parents have absolute rights as parents. So I am scratching my head here as to what is going on in their town.
Rene, I'm glad I'm not the only one. Bob, please educate me, educate Rene if I mean, what's happening? I know of no such law that says you have to have a certain IQ.
No, of course not, and that's outrageous. And what Rene is saying is exactly what the standard should be. But there were some facts in some of the data where the parents had indicated that they were not able to take care of the children. I don't know if this is true. I'm just telling you things that have been out there.
Of course.
That they were in the custody at certain points in times of other people because of difficulties. I don't suggest that's true, but I can tell you from being a prosecutor who dealt with child protection services all the time, maybe sometimes they go a little overboard, but let's see, because what usually happened with me is that they didn't do something, and then the child gets harmed or injured or killed, and then everyone points to the agency and says, why didn't you do anything? But we need a lot more facts here, Joe.
We do. But on the facts that we have, both Bob and Rene, I just can't, and no. I don't know what's happening. And I scratched my head before the story, when I listened to the story, and now having interviewed the mom, as well as the social worker, which we thank, by the way. Thank you for being here. I just, where do we live? I'm not getting it. In any event, Rene, Bob, stand by. Let me gather myself for the next story. We're in the attorneys now, Bob Bianchi and Rene Sandler. Before you react, let me just show you a soundbite, right? Let's listen to this and let's talk about it.
Spouses reflected a man and a woman in a marriage, and that is no longer a case that one would defend.
Is there a similar holding by the Supreme Court that man and monkey are the same?
No, Your Honor.
So, Miss Rene, if I can just ask you, a standing issue, meaning that you have no standing to sue. A person is a person, a monkey is an animal, and so what say you as to the original decision, which is the case was dismissed?
I agree with the original decision. I'm afraid I'm going to be tweeted or some hate groups coming out against me, but I do agree with the original position. They're beautiful photos. This monkey converted this photographer's camera for his own use, clearly, and to set up this suit. That's what I think.
Bob Bianchi, love monkeys, love animals. They're great creatures, but federal court system?
I think everybody's looking at this the wrong way. My father-in-law has always predicted we would get to a point where we would start to give monkeys and things like that the same constitutional protections and rights as humans. And here's my question.
Really?
Absolutely. Why not let them get married? Why not let them drive a car? And more importantly, if they pick up a gun and they shoot it, let's charge them with homicide and put them in a human jail. And here's what I'm really upset with this monkey case. Well, forget about the picture. He stole that guy's camera. Charge him with theft.
Just when I thought I heard it all, we'll be right back.